being with us here all together now. As we've been saying to you over the past 4 days, ours is a vast collective enterprise. We couldn't do any of this without you. And we hope in that spirit, you will see the beautifully designed donation boxes we've placed prominently in this room and others. Anything you can give that isn't gum, tissue paper, garbage, receipts, and bills of sale will not only be greatly appreciated, it will go directly into funding all our endeavors, including spaces like this and our year-round programming at the Writers' Center. I am delighted to be in conversation this morning with Canisia Lubrin, who, as you know, is the winner of the 2026 OCM Bocas Prize in Poetry. It has, for me, always been a deep delight to be with Canisia's words since the first time I encountered her first book, and that pleasure has only amplified, deepened, and grown. Canisia has written Voodoo Hypothesis, The Dysgraphist, Code Noir, The World After Rain, Anne's Poem, and the forthcoming Bright Machine. She is the recipient of a Wyndham Campbell Literature Prize for Poetry, an overall OCM Bocas Prize for Caribbean Literature, the Griffin Poetry Prize, the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction, the Danuta Gleed Literary Award, the Derek Walcott Prize, and has twice been a finalist for the Trillium Book Award and the Governor General's Awards for Poetry and Fiction. The World After Rain, Anne's Poem, is a phenomenal book. I won't say too much to pre-announce it. I'll let Canisia introduce you to her own words.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all here for poems. You know, you feel something good is in the world still when this happens. Thank you, Shivanee, for your company in poetry and in all things literature. Thank you, Bocas. Thank you, friends, and all of you who've come. It is time harvesting hit and runs, and motherhood hardening the ritual of doubtless love. The time of houses unlit by grieving SOSs. The room of my one life is full of the lights gone out. In spite of all my protest, if I outline myself in nothing now, a time-traveling letter to a daughter, is it that I have known the map, the maker of it, the doors, the maker of them, and yet, relettered near the last of time, your trembling so endless, your minutes dispensed at the drugstore. Is it that I am static, stunned without a shovel, in the time of damp soil, flooded deserts, the river that recollects us? I am keeping time, Mama, the time of stop signs and swarms, or learning to be nevertheless transparent as a wall. Here we've left salt at every limit, cells dividing the loyalties of each word we hold, abrupt in the presence of copied time, of poisoned mandible, the open bar of embarrassing questions. There's no ambition more skeletal than this heart leaping like a toad in our chest. Besides, I detect bargains, Mother, and you must come again to this howling. Will an ounce of honey do, neighbor? A piece of bread for hungry death, my dear? Say the minty staleness of a Monday afternoon. On second thought, what if life verves towards the heart and stops? Following quick time, the softening tracks cool and excellent. Huts already tremble where you walk. And in another poem, another poet's grandfather recites a different ode. I catch in its lampooned phrases the black liquids of a country of quietness draining from your throat. I don't tell you how this unsolvable room cleaves us, binds us again, how we were left to your bile ducts drizzling or torrents unnamed. Our non-weeping right eye, untrained for the marks of our forefeet along what I dread and need. You cannot have the memories I hold, your childhood in ancillary, soon updated into our wet forms. Enough. We will be chorused around disorder. Woman who exceeds how we are astonished into the last few hours of August by the whipping work of conclusion. Torso defined by a strong curve, hotly odored by the interior of a lesion, a taut membrane around our lives. The flammable blue light of our smoked mountain fading, potassium carbonate sawing the infected woods. The traps entering this story's wordless idea of a world without hail, without ill. These are not my traps to tell. Time worshiping time is a mother image, protracted bone from barking spine. I reject Anne, this ceremony of this metal mouth closing over your life. Oh, stop. Oh, stop. Oh, stop. Say stop. Say the passing of you from breath I have felt to memory I have fashioned. Is this how to forget? I am forgetting the twinliness of life and death, our movements between forms. Hollow time, in this sleep membraned interlude, I detach myself from every dead doubt. What was the sum of hair growth multiplied over each outlived year, despite resin stripping your religious texts of their confusions, as we might waste omens over shore breaks of twin oceans, footpaths, the veils of absolute trust gauzed our eyes. But for the sake of alchemy, shrines to Mama Dlo, let us talk of butterflies passing over New York, meeting no resistance, going past the galvanized sheds, as we have lately been, undertow. They are cutouts of themselves, at 560 miles beyond the earth, veining through the tall grasses unbid by our dead, next to a fortune of mirrors and years, switched as we are, still atmospheric, sequel of reunions. Isn't it time for our phosphorescence? Sounds of fur will eventually find me there with yellow mud, absorbed in your remitting need. Though enough and more tiffs pursue a paradise for you, proof of the waterlog of companionship, the demisting riverbed. Time, meanwhile, is rootless. More terrifying now, the body embattled by itself, things we are astonished by. It is time unspooling past time, galloping, lacking your speed. For I, too, am dying, mother, malachite hurdling the globe, 16 times faster than all man-made, into the static radio of air's quiet pitch. My fingers for your scalp. What sounds are these? Who overhears your leaving? I despise gravity thinning every moment since your birth. In this way, had you ever disturbed with the dirt of 4 continents under your fingernails, morphing the trail of cinnamon on someone's winter drink? Should I tell you, not me, not she, not myself, that in Venice, I am the patient, the doctor, and a fly all at once, prescribing walking on a page ringed with your unusable flood tides? 1,000 miles washed in your anonymous, your tired penmanship, grass-grown, undiminished, because I beg. It is time closed to eyes in Venice. I am patient, with a fly walking on a page, ringed with your tired penmanship. The indigo smoke of your stone oven, gusting, and like every previous time, time is a woman I respect, tending the geometry of a fly, its gray fur, head black, sand red, solar white, the page dark, violent too, round as squares. I am the one sitting across from your memory, preparing the outgrowth in your stomach for its life in an imaginary lagoon. From the dinner table where I am with friends, we are born early and severe, and seagulls' cries record soundlessly, fugitively, our mammalian wish to learn already the codes of unseen cliffs. Earthworms, I don't yet know, the thing creeping in the lung, worrying the too meager world, is what could stop us from running to an aid. To the lines of 8 children you grew in black soil, and a bright flame lifelong overhead. It is time for rumors now, the time of watering our shaking heads versus fires ahead. Instead, could it spread, forest to forest? Is your rant against the new king a scythe across continents, astonishing dead things that try to save us, craning from our nothingness as we heave the dead weight of our love up on our heads? How we are astonished that the trees mature 10 million years before our knowing what the wicked might reject 1,000 years from today. In the face of the fragments of this life, we are drizzled to bright sky. How still again we are astonished by a single life's width, or futureless, our vacant bones' thin exhaustions. And for that, it matters in the time of ordinary disputes that the throat does what it does. Thank you.
Thank you, Canisia.
Thank you, Shivanee.
We have been not so idly joking that one way we might share this hour with you is for Canisia to read the entirety of The World After Rain. I would be doing very little in this scenario, but I would also be lying if I said that a part of me wouldn't dearly delight in that. As you can hear, it is a deep and abiding and resonant pleasure to be with your words and to be with this work. Thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you for receiving it.
The World After Rain, Anne's poem, deals with and in anticipatory grief. And so the speaker of the poem, which is a long, unbroken poem, is looking forward to a kind of grief that will come, and of course, as one does in that process, collecting assorted griefs along the way. We know as writers, as much as people, grieving it can be called one process, but it is perhaps made up of a million small sub-processes, and the same thing is true of writing. And Canisia, I wanted us to begin our sharing by thinking about what is your own writing through stages of grief to get to a grief you can only see on the horizon. What did it bring to you in the process of writing this book?
Thank you for the prompt. I think I want to answer the question 2 ways, because I wrote the book in a single burst a decade ago. And then I put it away somewhere I couldn't see it physically. And I only went back to it because I was prompted by my agent. She wants to know what else I have and what are all the things. And certainly you have things that are destined for the garbage bin. But this one is a thing I needed to do. It came out of necessity following, personal tragedy with my mother's hospitalization and surgery and subsequent, there was an error that the surgeon made that he did not take seriously. And really the only definition for what from what that was is medical racism. My mother was neglected and dismissed. And I was witness to all of this, advocating for many hours a day while I was actually editing Voodoo Hypothesis. But I felt an anger that the person who went into the hospital, my mother, that vibrant, independent, boisterous person, left the hospital, although the professionals there didn't think that she would, a completely transformed person, unable to practice any of the things that had really made her who she was. And I was deeply angry. And so I had to, in a sense, deal with that anger. And it is not something that I can claim to have orchestrated, so that I can stay with the sub-processes and learn from them as I go. It was a single 16-hour burst. I only realized it was 16 hours when I looked up, and the sun was out, and there was a spasms in my lower back, and I just thought, okay, writing has done something here. It is anticipating, when they give you a diagnosis that says, you probably have a couple of years left, there's plan for this and plan for that. It's a ghostly kind of grief. It doesn't have anywhere to land. And you are freighting a lot. So you write about the world, I think, that your beloved inherited, existed in, moved through, lived in, suffered in, and all of the vernaculars of those locations entered the piece. But again, I didn't think about it for 10 years until I went back and saw what was there. And I'm actually pleased that my agent did that. But because I don't have any serious autobiographical commitments, I am always looking beyond myself, beyond the immediacy of my own concerns and limitations and constraints. And the world that the return to the book met was one filled with grief. Just everything going on right now, from Haiti to Gaza to Congo to Palestine to Iran to Venezuela, it's so much compounded concentric grief. And it is the fractionated experience of the world that entered my rereading of it. And it didn't change much, except that I felt I had honored the mysterious qualities of facing grief and not needing to reduce it to a thesis. That to me felt like the most honest thing. I could have gone in and explained away all of the things, but that to me would feel false.
I mean, you say that you could have gone in and explained things, but in my years of reading you, everything you shared publicly, that feels very counter to your constellation of belief systems. In what you've given us, there is no forward gesture to pre-announce motivation. We get to live with the intensity of that motivation, which I've always loved.
Thank you. You know, I think it's, when you're writing about the loss of a beloved or what will become the loss of a beloved, there might be a deep anxiety to account and to be accurate in terms of a kind of diaristic commitment to what actually happened, you know. And in a sense, it's not very different, to my mind, than the kind of scientific pro forma investigation that like a Darwinian scholar would do. You know, here's a beak, it's this shape, it goes in that hole, and that's how the evolution happened. It's like, here's a mother, she made bread, she put the thing in the pot in this way, and she said exactly those things. You know, I think there's something to the logic that we tend to attach to wanting to get things right and honoring the specificity of the person, honoring their privacies as well. That might make one think you should explain this and explain that. But I'm glad I'm not that kind of poet.
No, I'm glad you're not either. You mentioned your mother went into the hospital, one person, and emerged another. It made me wonder about something I was going to bring up anyway, but I'll bring it up a little sooner. These twinned forces of what is unknowable, essentially, about a person, including people we love the most, who love us the most, alongside disclosure. How much can we say? How much do we feel emboldened or ennobled to say about these people we love?
Yeah, I mean, that's the real tension of the book, and it was also a challenge for me in my own philosophy and ethos as a poet, my own politics. I think the elegy, its magnetism is in its relationality. It's a relational form, meaning, you know, the elegy does not, that kind of singing does not exist outside of relation. You have to be somehow inside of it, or you have to be in a relationship to what is being mourned that prefigures a kind of really deep down relation and connection. Because the life raft of grief, what holds it up is love. You don't mourn the things you don't love. And so I wanted, in fact, for that person that I knew who my whole life was the larger than life character, you know, my mother who, you know, by her laugh. We walk down the road, my siblings and I, and there's always something to laugh about. And somebody would say, "Is so-and-so your mother?" Just by the quality of our laughter. And she was that kind of figure to me. She was just mysterious, miraculous, you know, really fastidious about you know, certain things. And I wanted to figure out a way to make sure that I was actually honoring that when I reread the book. Because again, I wrote it and I left it alone. And then when I was editing it with Dion, she said to me, "Don't do the thing you usually do when I give you feedback." Which is, I can walk away and completely transform the book. I can write a whole new book. You know, I'm not precious about my lines. So, but you know, I think Dion also just, you know, she doesn't really understand that not every book is the dysgraphist yet, you know? That, that thing was its own creature, and it required rewriting. Dion, I love you. But yes, I said, you know, I got you. She said, change this word and that phrase, these punctuation marks. I'm snagging on the rhythm here and there, and don't touch anything else. Because you have done something here that if you go and tamper with it too much, you will ruin it. Right? And I, of course, listen. When Dion Brand talks to you, you gotta listen to Dion Brand, right? And so I thought that was the most important thing for me to capture. The mysterious quality of this woman, the kinds of qualities that I always admired, because they was always slightly beyond the language that I had. And it's a thing that kept me in awe of her and everything that she was able to accomplish with the meager materialities of our lives, but with massive interiority, you know? And that's what I wanted the poem to carry in my going back to it and rereading it, and making sure that I was honoring that somehow.
And now we have almost a world after rain, after rain. The world, I mean, the book has lived with you so much longer than it has been with us. And so it has been happening, I'm sure, that you have people, readers, who have their own and are carrying their own conceptions of Anne, their own. A cornucopia of Annes will assemble, each with slightly different figurings in the minds of others. And these readers too, we, the readers, will love and esteem different things about her. Has at any point so far any of that felt like a confrontation?
No, not yet. I think people always want to know more about Anne. You know, and I think that's exactly right. You know, I would have hated for disclosure to have obliterated the power of curiosity. I value imagination so much. I think it's a lot more important than doctrine. It's a lot more important than the small corridor we call identity, that forecloses so much in the world. The thing that was meant to be liberating has become enclosure. And I think freedom, especially in the imagination, is the most capacious thing we can have. And people, they just want to know more. They're like, tell us more about this woman, you know? And they would come to that. They would arrive there by their own disclosure. My mother passed away X. My mother is currently sick, and this is what's coming. You know, I'm currently caring for my mother, or, you know, it's a lot of that kind of work. And I think the intimacy of utterance that the poem, or any poem, should put into the world is exactly to open up that space, right? And I think that's where we can endlessly proliferate, you know, beyond the enclosures of all of the little labels, all of the little labels. Which is why I much prefer a kind of poetic terrain that is filled with wonderment, rather than like a small disclosure about something.
Yes, thank you for that. I would thank you for everything that you've done in the book, but then that would also take all the time that we have. You would think, perhaps, if you haven't spent time with this book yet, that it might feel insular. It is describing in detail across time periods something that feels and is, on the one hand, very personal and intimate, a relationship between a mother and a child. But I think you will find that the book also, at every turn, opens itself endlessly, generously to the gaze of the entire world, to all things that are living, and yes, all things that are still dead. But the doors of the book are constantly open for us all, which to me feels like the most astonishing generosity.
Thank you, Shivanee. I think what I would like to say about that, the worldliness, let's say, of the poem, is that the anticipatory grief makes everything feel vulnerable and tenuous. You don't stand in any measure of security other than the measure of what you are singing about. And that's the great confidence of it, is in that singing, as strange as it might sound, as incongruous as it might sound, as defying of logic that it might present itself. The whole world feels vulnerable to it and through its own connection with other vulnerabilities that are happening. So, which is why I also had to, look at ecological grief. The kind of catastrophe of, militarism, and all of these things that propel ruin into our lives, that force grief, even something like medical racism, that we're constantly always navigating some form of grief. And it's being in the suspended animation of the anticipatory that produces the kind of vulnerability that pulls the entire world into the experience of that grief. And I just thought, there's no way I'm the only person out there experiencing this. But it's not a thing we actually hear talked about very much, And I think there's an imperative for us to reckon with our sense of relation to each other, to the world, through this measure of what is grieved, And I think if we go through it that way, it softens us. It softens us somehow,
It does. It does, and that might be, I suspect, in all times and in these times, one of the things we need the most from ourselves, each other, from poems, from our own managements of the sub-processes of grief and love, which, as you say, cannot but live together on that raft. I mean, you've given us Voodoo Hypothesis, The Dysgraphist, and this long poem. And in those first two books, I never felt distant from those speakers. I never felt that they held me at distance as they moved through the world, particularly the Dysgraphist. And yet, in the world after rain, I feel so close to the speaker of the poem that at times you feel you can reach out and blow breath on their eyelashes and they would feel it. That is the gift of this intimacy. How do you feel about letting us that close?
I feel it was necessary. If I was going to sing about my beloved, I'd better let you touch my eyelashes. Let your rain mix with mine, in a sense, because it's an expression of that thing that we all will experience or have experienced somehow. And I think I value, intimacy very much. Across all of my works, there's to me, it has to be bodily. Yes, poetry is a way that I think. It's a way of thinking for me, thinking about the world, thinking about myself, etc. But it always has to be in the body, because that is how we make the storehouse or the architecture of our lives is always through the body, right? So, but I think the intimacy really is that I have dared to sing publicly in a way that I have not before. And I think anytime we sing publicly about people we love, we are engaged in a monumental activity. There's nothing small about that. There's nothing minor about that. And I think that is the work of the elegy, and there are many different kinds of elegies. Some of the strangest ones you'll ever come across are the self-elegies, where poets write about their own impending death. You know, Derek Walcott did it, you know, Kamal Brathwaite, Emily Dickinson, because I could not stop for death. It kindly stopped for me. They're very weird elegies, and I think, you know, that's why I think the elegy is like the epitome of the relational mode. You know, the lamentation, the exaltation, the praise, and finally the consolation. And I think that's where we can meet eyelash to eyelash, is in the kinds of consolations that don't always look like consolation.
The Bocas Lit Fest cameras are not yet advanced enough to pick up that technology. We're going to get there. No thanks to AI.
No.
Speaking of Walcott, he's one of the 3 epigraphs in The World After Rain. So to think of Walcott, to think of Brand, to think of the beautiful things that Tessa McWatt said last night about the ways in which she felt you, as much as your books, both of you as writers, met each other unknowingly in these way stations, in these waiting rooms of grief along the way, made me think what I have thought before, but think it all the more that this book is also as open to the voices of other writers.
Absolutely. I mean, I am an intertextual writer, right? I'm always in conversation because I think that's where community lives. And there's always a lineage that you're entering. The idea that somehow the writer is this solitary genius coming up with original things up in some tower is utter fiction. There's a massive, massive tradition of things. Even when, you know, you could put it between a set of years, that's a lot of work someone has done. And it's important, right, to be mindful, I think, of how the thing that you are concerned by has developed, you know, over its life in the hands, the mouths, and ears of other thinkers and artists. And I very much value that. And I think especially now, where we have a world that is so warped by toxic individualism, we need certainly the cross currents of our thinking and work and doing and making to face the perils in front of us. The only way to go through it is together. And I am committed to a certain tradition that, in fact, is predicated on what the community voices. You know, we're still down here. We're not in Sam Altman's terrifying apocalyptic future where he's metering out intelligence to people based on how much they want to pay for it. This sadistic, terrifying individualism that leads there, I think, is a thing that was born probably on the killing floor of modernity, you know. And there's so much thinking that's been done that we can take that and forward a different vision of the world, because there's way more of us than there are of these terrible people, you know. So.
And in that spirit, community, I think you all want to be eyelash to eyelash with Canisia. Who could resist, frankly? Not me. There's a roving mic in the room for your questions and your comments and your eyelashes. Please put your hand up if you'd like the mic to come to you to say something to Canisia.
Too funny. I'll take the eyelash only if you dip it in gold first.
Thank you for your eyelashes, Maria.
I was wondering, Canisia, to put something down for 10 years is a long time. What it was like for you when you first revisited it. So much in your life would have happened. So much would have happened to your grief.
Yes.
So if you could share with us that first re-encounter with it.
That's a beautiful question, Maria. Thank you. I was surprised at the girl that I saw in it, and realized that grief is a disfiguring thing. It could disfigure you, but in a way that makes you hungrier for what is good. And I think that is the reconfiguration that retrospect allows. And I could see that something crucial happened in that time that I'm really thankful for today. I was like, wow, all right. That girl, I'm so glad she had this to say. Because it really, it made me a lot more alert to something that was necessary for me to carry on. And it was surprising to see who was there. But then even the language itself was surprising. I was actually quite surprised by a lot of the things in there because I really don't remember writing much of it at all. I probably remembered 5 phrases, So it was becoming reacquainted with my voice in a certain way, and how it had probably catapulted beyond where I was. Because this actually sounds like something I would write today. Yeah.
Thanks, Maria. Anyone else? Yes.
Good morning. I am Eric Estelle. Now, I've been listening to your discourse, and something struck me about it. Central to your anger, if I could so say, there seemed to have been something that you wanted to say, but you hold the reins back. Although you just mentioned it en passant, the whole question of what you said was medical racism. You seem not to want to go any further after that. You care to comment?
Absolutely. It is because I am honoring my mother's privacy. That's really all it is. Yeah. So we have to somehow, yes, you're singing publicly, but not absolutely everything has to be said. And certainly there are ethics to disclosure. So I'm just observing the limits of my own.
Thank you for the question. There's one in the front, please.
Thank you to the gentleman who just spoke before, because that is a great launching off point for something that I was quite curious about, which is the kind of ever-shifting kind of like matrices, when you're writing about someone who is and was real and someone who is and was influential and central to, the kind of author's life. But also wanting to respect that they are their own person, right? And so I'd be interested to hear your thoughts about that kind of, I won't even call it a balancing act, like a kind of dance, anxiety-inducing dance, of how to kind of gesture towards their fullness without kind of over-explaining or giving it all away or making them into something that they're not.
Right, exactly. I think that's the that's the risk, is that we fashion so much in the attempt to report, let's say, that we can end up creating myths or archetypes or even entirely fictions. But I think the ethics of disclosure, when you write about other people, or people that you love, or even your enemies and such, for me, what I actually tell my students is you're writing your story. You're not writing theirs, right? Because you only have access to your story, right? In observing that there is so much about the person that you don't know, and even some of the things you know, because they are their own people with their own lives, you have to observe the integrity of their lives and the integrity of what you yourself can disclose without the mirror becoming warped. You know, and the mirror can become so warped that what comes back at you arrives at a great distance and a great cost of, you know, the thing that you want to sing about or write about. So it is primarily that I am telling my story and my version of things. And to observe also that I just don't have access to everything, because I'm sure there are things that my mother does not disclose, did not say, will not say. And I think that's enough to simply tell your version of the thing.
Canisia, in another when, we might not ever have had this book. We might have come perilously close to it remaining where it was, pre-agent. What have the revelations been for you in the sharing? Because for me, and I think for many, the gifts of this book are extraordinary.
The revelations. It's probably still unfolding. Every time I gather something, it's like making a tesseract. I get one square to add to the ever expanding set of squares. But just, I think, I'm happy simply to celebrate my mother's life. And my desires are that humble, that precise. I'm just happy to sing, and that is its own gift, to be able to sing publicly about people or someone who would be disinclined to even speak about themselves. I think that's the power. It's that the folk sensibility is that ordinary people are disinclined to speak about themselves because they're not important enough or whatever it is. And I say no, actually, to sing publicly about your beloved, whether they're, I don't know, a prime minister or, you know, somebody who is a janitor, is to fundamentally be involved in the same activity. And that activity, to me, will always be monumental.
May I invite you to share your second reading with us?
Sure. And from fine print time, this close to the world, the grasses sing how we are astonished. Singing, we'll sing forever in your wake, since it is still easy to breathe in the fog of new labors, new lovers, new bones, astonished to agree with the vastness of evolution, since the fiction of our lives is like that. Astonished, the house grows fat with non-disclosure, since our admissions break, winded on empire's playfield. Astonished, this endless house looked only mildly like our first waiting. Since the weather woman's best debate doubts our eavesdrops. Astonished to announce what little I've come to, you must know your life. Since the meteorology of our windfalls shields time from the feet of its worst. Astonished, you are not the man words come to, just standing by a wall and bathing in them forever. And from fine print time, disclosed to the world, I have first choices, Savoy. Alkaline rains I cool in the dustpan under your house, overhead. Moon water falls from the clapboarded floor of your late mother's bedroom, where I listened to her leave, long distance, and the bloodshot sky dyed itself on my retina, a study of our joint life. Primed these waters above our heads, now heavier than they ever were, more silent than a gale gone to eternally stalls. Astonished at the garbage truck of our discontent, already bloodletting its omnivorous load all along our lives. Since today, our new trades with tremors and thrifted silverware, the world-long montages of month-old floods have come, crossed saltwater prologues, upset larvae of bright mosquitoes. Come, woman from fine print time, disclose to the world the forecast of our noontime births outdoors. How I distrust every form of authority, chiefly my own astonishment. This poisoned wish is why I love. I bow to deserts, these clay children of forests everywhere. I love the rain, this is no secret. I love the solar wind. Hold their elliptical life in the wasteland of our third mouths, where flowers are invisible and bones are sanded and amusing, and every heliopause cloud senses our head. How we astonish our memories, vining where no shade is enough. Since many who'll feed me will refuse me their names, and good, who knows what bargains I would make with their meanings. More bundles of time, tournaments of family recipes, with you at my question. Woman from fine print time, if I disclose to the world all the patrons of rank primed for astonishment, you said, all I have for you c'est prier Dieu, la vie à la tête en bas. If cowardly I said, I need nothing else. If soberly I could say, give me your cloudburst courage, the water of your life sloughing on always, and in whose currents none drown. Not me or any of my sisters, not me or any of my brothers, not them who eat mercy, the inertia of a birth into black hole time, into comforting myths. Me, I might clear all love from the roof of this world, since all the thoughts I have are underwater, since only one of them is waterlogged. I've checked, I've eaten mercy.
Please join me in congratulating again Canisia Lubrin, winner of the 2026 OCM Bocas Prize for Poetry. Canisia, in a world where everything has felt like an accumulation of too muchness, thank you for making this the exactly, perfectly right kind of everything.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. And thank you all. Thank you, Bocas. Thank you.
There are copies of The World After Rain, Anne's poem, for sale. Canisia will be signing books just outside the old fire station. Please continue to stay with us at the 2026 Focus Lit Fest. Because physics are what they are, you will be passing right by the donation boxes. There is no other way to leave. And you'll want to get your book signed, visit the donation box, and please come back right here at 1 p.m. for Tessa McWatt and Danielle Boudy-Fortuny. Thank you.